Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I hope to make this as interesting and short as possible because I realize that this is a Tuesday evening. Everyone's probably had a full day of work and everyone's probably tired. As Jen says, the topic today is the FDA registration of combination products. So first, some definitions. Drug. I guess everyone in this call knows what a drug is. I mean, we're all in the business. We're all involved in some aspect of the drug, whether you're producing it, whether you're in QC, whether you're releasing the drugs. On the screen, and I'm not going to read it word for word, is what the FDA defines a drug to be. Okay? A substance other than food intended to affect the structure or any function of the body. Obviously, it is intended for use in the cure, treatment, and prevention of a disease. And also note that biological products are included in this definition. Medical device. Again, on the slide, it's the FDA definition. But a medical device is basically a contraption used for diagnosis, cure, mitigation, treatment, or prevention of disease. It's meant to improve your quality of life. And with or without knowing it, we're probably using it, in our everyday lives. For example, Band-Aids, contact lenses, spectacles, hearing aids, implants, like cochlear implants, stents, pacemakers, even bedpans and hospital beds are considered medical devices. Okay, so that brings us to a combination product. So the FDA has got lots of definitions, has got a lengthy definition of a combination product, but put simply, it's basically a drug plus a device, a biologic plus a device, drug plus biologic, or combination of all three, drug, device, and biologic. Okay, an example would be a contact lens. It's a medical device, but then you have medicated devices, medicated lenses. It becomes a combination product. A stent, heart stent, again, it's a medical device, but when you coat it like a stent with a microbial coating, it's a combination product. Again, a syringe, it's a medical device. If you pre-fill it with insulin or, like EpiPen, it becomes a combination product. So that's basically it. And it goes on, like catheters are medical devices, but if you coat it again with a microbial coating, it becomes a combination device. Even your first aid kit under FDA guidelines, it's a medical device because it's two or more, it's drug plus device separately packaged, unlike your EpiPen where it's all in one. So, which brings us to the primary mode of action. It's basically the single mode of action of a combination product that provides the most important therapeutic action. So basically looking at it, which is more important, the drug or the medical device? For example, a drug-eluting stent. The primary mode of action is the stent because it opens the artery. The microbial coating is secondary. Drug-eluting disc, however, the primary mode of action is the drug because without the drug, there's no point having the disc. Now, if it's a bone graft substitute, the primary mode of action is both, okay? Is the drug as well as the device for delivery. So if it's just a drug, it falls under the purview of CDRH, which is the CDER, Center for Drug Evaluation and Research. If it's just a medical device, it's the Center for Devices and Radiological Health. And if it's a biologic, it falls under CBER, which is the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research. I've attached a link in these slides for the guidance for industry. And I believe the slides are available later on. So if you click on the link, it'll bring you to the page. So if it's drug-led versus device-led, okay, and when we say drug-led, it's also biologic. They look for different things. If it's drug-led, the focus is on efficacy, potency, and safety of the drug. If it's device-led, it's the action. How does the device work? And in addition to that, it's compliance with other industrial standards on how the device works. The reviewing divisions, as I said on the earlier slide, are slightly different. And obviously the application type is different as well. For drugs, it's an NDA or an ANDA, or even a BLA if it's a biologic device. If it's device-led, it is pre-market approval or 510(k) pre-market submission. A little bit more. So if it's a drug, you submit a new drug application or an ANDA, an abbreviated new drug application. Okay, I'll go into the differences in a bit. If it's a device, okay, first you've got to classify your device. They do what they call the de novo classification. It classifies a medical device. It's a risk-based approach. It's a risk-based evaluation for classification into classes 1, 2, or 3 of the medical device. Class 1 is lowest risk. It's got the minimal potential for harm. For example, stethoscopes, thermometers, things like that. Class 2 is where it's a moderate risk device. For example, cranial sound monitor, electronic stethoscope, ultrasound. Now, class 3 has the highest risk. Class 3 devices are used to sustain or support life. And basically, without it, there's a serious risk of illness or injury. Examples include pacemakers, life support devices, dialysis machines. Class 1 and 2, you would submit a 510(k) submission to the FDA. For class 3, you would submit a PMA, pre-market approval application. Okay. The difference between an NDA or an ANDA. An NDA is when you have a new drug in the market. It's not there, it's never been in the market before. So therefore, it's a new drug application. An ANDA, abbreviated new drug application, is when there is already a drug in the market and you can prove that your drug is like that drug. So it's just a slightly different submission in terms of documentation. And the BLA, your biologic license application, I'm afraid I can't go into great detail about that because my knowledge is somewhat limited on that. I'm more familiar with device and drugs. Okay, another thing to consider when you want to submit a drug, to the FDA, is it over the counter? We're all familiar with over-the-counter drugs, right? We use it every day. Acne cream, sunscreen, sanitizers. Again, on the slide is the FDA definition of over-the-counter drugs. We also use over-the-counter medical devices every day, bandages, menstrual products, condoms, blood pressure machines. Over-the-counter, it's deemed safe by the FDA. You get it off the shelf, and it's up to the user on how they use it. For example, your blood pressure monitor to diagnose, and then you react or you do what's appropriate for yourself. If your sugar's too high, you adjust it. It's low potential for misuse. We'd like to think that it's, idiot proof, that people are not going to misuse stuff. And that's why it's over the counter. Now, there's also OTC monograph drugs, which are drugs that are safe and effective for use by the general public without seeking, basically drugs which you don't need a prescription for, okay? What's special about an OTC monograph drug is that it can be marketed without an approved drug application. It's still approved by the FDA. It's just that you don't have to go through the NDA and ANDA process, okay? So long as you can prove to the FDA that your active ingredients, your users, dosage, routes of administration, and all that conforms to Section 505G, they might let you get away with an OTC drug, a monograph drug submission. It's basically showing the FDA your recipe, your active ingredients, how you do it, and the end product. So the FDA will then determine if your OTC monograph is acceptable. And examples of FDA monographs include medicines for acne, antifungal, antacids, antimicrobial cream, your antiperspirant, hand sanitizer, mouthwashes, sunscreen. So earlier on, I touched on bioequivalence. Now, that's when you can prove that you've got this new drug and it's got the same properties in terms of quality, safety, and strength as a reference listed drug. What is a reference listed drug? It's a drug which has already been approved by the FDA and it's on the market, whether by prescription or if it's over the counter. If you got that, you can submit an ANDA. Okay, there's a misconception that generic drugs, which is what you're trying to prove, you've got a generic drug, for example, you want to prove that it's bioequivalent to an existing drug. Now, there seems to be a misconception that it's not as good as the real thing. However, the FDA does ensure that generic drugs match the original reference listed drug in terms of quality, safety, efficacy, and strength. The generic drug is tested against the existing drug, and you get bio waivers if it can be proved that the generic drug has the same dosage form, concentration as the existing drug, and the same physiochemical characteristics. I'm sure we're all familiar with generic drugs. For example, Zyrtec, generic drug on the market is citrazine. It's widely prescribed in Singapore and the rest of the world. Paracetamol, every other paracetamol on the market is generic. Even now, asthma inhaler, Symbicort, it's a generic drug and it's approved by the FDA in 2022. So this is the difference between your NDA application and your ANDA application. Okay, you've got all these documents to fill. Again, this slide is available. The links are active. So when you get the slide later on, if you look it up, go ahead and click on it. Which brings me now to my case study. So there's this company, they want to produce patches containing a mild steroid cream for the relief of skin conditions, insect bites, eczema, dermatitis, and rashes. What they're essentially doing is they're putting a steroid on a Band-Aid, okay? Now, they think that it's a straightforward application because you've got your topical steroid, it's already in the market. Obviously, Band-Aids are OTC medical devices. So we had a look at it. And it is true that steroid cream, which they want to use, is OTC, over the counter, in low dosages. Higher dosages, we discovered, requires a doctor's prescription. That's fine. But we don't think it's so straightforward because when you put a steroid on a Band-Aid, you're changing the mode of delivery. It's no longer topical, it's transdermal. And the difference between transdermal and topical delivery systems is that transdermal delivery systems deliver drugs through the skin and into the bloodstream, whereas topical delivery systems only deliver the drug locally. So if you think of, you're putting like acne cream or even this topical steroid on your skin, it stays on your skin. You have a shower, it gets washed off. You brush against something, it gets wiped off. So it's just that area. Whereas if you cover it, it actually goes into your bloodstream. Okay, so what's the first thing we do? We classify the product. As per FDA Regulation 21 CFR 3.2E, it's classified as a combination type 2 product. It's a pre-filled drug delivery system. Okay, that is in the same classification as a drug syringe, auto-injection, your EpiPens, asthma inhalers, your nasal sprays. So this is a transdermal system. Your primary mode of action is the drug because basically the Band-Aid, without it, it's useless, right? Without the drug, your Band-Aid is useless. So therefore, it's a drug-led combination product. A little bit about transdermal patches. So that's a diagram of a transdermal patch. When we look at it, we see a Band-Aid, but it's actually slightly more than that. It has got 5 layers, right? You've got the liner, the adhesive, the membrane, the drug itself. Sometimes this drug, it's contained in a reservoir as well, the more complicated ones, where it's a reservoir of drug in the patch. So the drug is released, it's a time release into the body. Examples of transdermal patches. Nowadays, it's used in everything, basically. You want to stop smoking, motion sickness, birth controls, insect bites, okay? Now, those are the over-the-counter ones. They've developed transdermal patches for stuff like Alzheimer's, depression, hypertension, schizophrenia, and ADHD. And why would you use a patch? Well, quite a few reasons. Ease of application compared to a needle. You know, if you've got, I'm sure many of us identify children, compared to holding the kid down, you know, dealing with a struggling kid, it's easier to slap on a transdermal patch. Swallowing difficulties, especially if the patient is unconscious, old, or a kid, much easier to put a patch on. Patients who forget to take pills, you know, you don't need to be ill or be forgetful. Everybody forgets at some stage. How many times have we all forgotten to take our antibiotic? And also with transdermal patches, you get steady dosing, okay, where the drug levels are more evenly sustained throughout a period of time. Because when you take an oral drug, the minute you take it, you receive a high initial blood concentration of the active ingredient, and then it slowly peters out. It slowly declines until you take the next dose. And if you've got a transdermal patch, it circumvents the side effects of oral drugs as well. For example, for arthritis, a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug is prescribed to control the pain. Okay, a common side effect of the oral drug is gastric bleeding, which is a common reason for hospitalization. But when you put the patch on, it bypasses your stomach, so you don't get gastric bleeding. It bypasses the digestive tract, the liver, and the kidneys. And also, it's a lower dosage compared to oral medication. The active ingredient may be destroyed by the acids in the digestive tract or reduced when broken down in the liver and kidneys. This is for oral medication. So therefore, oral medications are in higher dosages to offset the losses. And higher dosages mean more complications and more side effects. The downsides of transdermal patches: high costs. It's more expensive to manufacture because you've got your drug and your device, and it's also more complicated to manufacture. Also, you get people who are forgetful and put more than one patch, for example, at the same time. You know, they've forgotten that they've put it on, so they put another patch, right? And also you've got people not using as per instruction. Okay, the downside is that some of these transdermal patches, you can't use them in extreme conditions. For example, don't go into the sauna or don't go into a walk-in freezer with them. You can't do an MRI with them on because they actually burn. So what we would recommend, going back to the transdermal patch that our client had, you know, the steroid, is to write a request for designation or a pre-request for designation with the FDA. The main difference between a request for designation and a pre-request for designation is that one is binding and one is not. As per 21 CFR 3.7, an RFD request for designation is a voluntary action for help in classification of the combination product. It is submitted to the Office of Combination Products. There's a whole lot of information to be provided. Again, it's on this slide. Mainly, the FDA want to know what your primary mode of action is. Okay, once that's defined, whether it's drug-led or device-led, the Office of Combination Product will forward the request to the relevant center. The center will then review and write a short memo, either agreeing or disagreeing with the company. And the OCP, Office of Combination Product, will make the final decision. They will usually make the decision in 60 days. Okay, in this case, because it's a transdermal and a topical delivery system, this is the document. If you click on the link again, it's to be used with the application document, which is the guidance for industry, M4Q. And the sections on the right-hand side, basically, the M4Q is a document where it's a template and you fill in the document. So to get approval for this particular transdermal patch, you need to provide all that information, QTPP, CQA, your risk assessment. What I've done here is I've prioritized what's most important. There's a whole lot more, and you've got to provide all this, right? In addition to your clinical studies, including your placebo batches. Okay. So to summarize how you submit an application for that topical steroid on the Band-Aid, you write a RFD or pre-RFD to the FDA, and then you'd fill up your M4Q, and then you'd also submit, after filling it up, together with your NDA or ANDA. And that's it. That concludes my presentation. I hope I've covered it, and I hope I haven't left people more confused, than to begin with.
Yeah, thank you, Susan, for sharing very clearly on some of the common considerations for combination product submission to the FDA. We'll be taking questions from the audience, and I will start. Maybe I'll start the ball rolling with a question of my own.
Sure.
So, what are some of the key considerations in determination whether it should be a device-led or the drug-led application?
That's the PMOA, primary mode of action. So, for example, okay. So, for example, my example that I just gave, the steroid on the Band-Aid. The Band-Aid alone doesn't do anything. It's a steroid, so therefore it's drug-led. But for example, if it's a microbial coated stent, okay, it's coated with a microbial coating. That's to prevent infection when you insert it. But the microbial coating doesn't do much. It's the stent that keeps the patient alive. So in that case, it's the device. So it's a device-led combination product. So therefore, if it's device-led, you'd submit 510K in the example I gave, because it's the stent it's a class 3, so you'd submit a pre-market approval. If it's drug-led, the Band-Aid and the steroid cream, you'd submit an ANDA. However, if you can find an equivalent product on the market, in the supermarket, you can submit an ANDA, an abbreviated new drug application. So you've got to prove that what you have is equivalent to what there is on the market, which has already been approved by the FDA.
So it depends mainly on the primary mode of application.
Exactly. Yeah, primary mode of action.
Okay. So the next will be, are there any common pitfalls observed based on your experience for product submission? So for example, going back to the case study that you shared on the transdermal patches, what are some of the common pitfalls that may be observed during the product submission?
A lot of times people don't submit all the documents that's required to the FDA.
Mhm.
So it delays timings because it's an incomplete submission. From what I understand, and I'm afraid I haven't spoken directly to the FDA, but my colleague in the US has, apparently the FDA are actually quite friendly and helpful. And you ring them and you actually speak to them, and you actually get good advice on the phone. They're receptive and they're helpful, but even they can't help you if your submission is incomplete. From what I understand, whatever's on the FDA website, if you follow it, you should be able to get your submission in. It is true they ask for a lot of documents, but obviously they've got to make sure that patient safety is the first priority. So that's why you have to cover it all, basically.
Right. So the onus is still on the product design owner to provide and furnish the supporting evidence for the
Exactly.
regulatory requirements.
Yeah, exactly.
So you shared on the shortcutting on some of the being able to prove to the FDA via the proof of the bioequivalence. So
Yep.
going back to the case study, what are some of the key considerations that we could use to be able to prove this bioequivalence for the case study?
Okay, so that's the problem with this case study. So the manufacturer seems to think that, oh, it's straightforward because we've got this steroid, it's already on the shelf. Yes, it's true. I agree, it is on the shelf, but they don't seem to realize that it's on the shelf as a topical cream, like acne cream. When you put it on a patch, because the patch is in contact for longer than, it's temporarily on your body, the mode of delivery is different. It goes from topical to transdermal. It gets absorbed into your bloodstream. So it's actually a different ball game. So we are actually struggling to prove bioequivalence because there's no equivalent product, as far as we know, on supermarket shelves. So we don't know. The answer is we don't know what the FDA will say. The FDA might say, fine, that's okay based on your studies. So obviously your clinical studies are important. If you look into the document, transdermal and topical delivery systems, this one, oh, okay, and I've just lost it. Product development and quality considerations,
Yeah,
they
we
go
can
as
see your
far
screen.
as to say, am I not sharing my screen now? I've
You
lost
are.
it.
We can see your screen. So you're at the summary slide right now.
Right. Okay. It goes as far as to say that, you've got to present all your clinical trials. They even want clinical trials, your research and your data on excised skin, on 3 samples of excised skin. So I don't know where you're going to get excised skin from. I can only assume where you'd get excised skin from, but there's a whole lot. You've got your control group, you've got your placebo group. Sorry, that's the same thing. Sorry, you've got your test group and you've got your placebos as well, and then your stability studies. So they've got to prove that it's equivalent to whatever's out there in the supermarket shelf. We are struggling to find something equivalent. There's a whole lot, like your acne patches, nicotine patches, motion sickness. It's all on the supermarket shelf. But steroid on a transdermal patch, I don't think it's been done before.
So, next question we have will be on whether there's a scenario when we can use the pre-request for designation. Is there a scenario where we can use the pre-request for this?
Sorry, pre-request for designation. So you would put your request for designation as part of your approval, because the request for designation is basically saying to the FDA, can you tell us what it is? And it's official, so you don't waste your time thinking that it's something else. So back to my example, if we write to the FDA saying that it's a transdermal patch, we think it's a transdermal patch, and the FDA comes back and says, no, it's not, then we won't even be looking at this transdermal and topical patch delivery systems. We'll look at whatever the FDA says it is. If it's just topical delivery, then we'll pull up the documents for topical delivery. Have I answered the question correctly?
I think the question is more on under what circumstances would we use the pre-request rather than the request?
Oh,
Um,
I'm sorry. So the pre-request is non-binding.
okay.
Both are voluntary. You don't have to do it. Request for designation is basically black and white. FDA says it's this. The pre-request for designation, it's basically not in black and white. You'd still submit documents. So from my point of view, if you're going to do a pre-request for designation, you might as well get a formal request for designation. That way it seals it, it's written in stone that the FDA says it is this type of classification, and it makes your life easier down the road.
Okay. Next would be on okay, I think there was a sharing from someone on the fact that the steroid on transdermal patches can present more harm than good. There's also a question on whether if we need more services regarding this in this area, how can we reach out to you?
Oh, okay. Well, reach out to us. My name is there. I don't think my email address is, but yes, feel free to contact me.
I believe you are available on LinkedIn, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So I believe that the information on the slides will also be shared with everyone who is in.
Yes, apparently it will be on the ISP YouTube channel.
Yes,
So
keep a lookout for our channel. Yeah. Any other questions from the audience? If not, thank you very much, Suan, for joining us today.
okay, thank you all for listening. And I know you were listening because there were questions. So thank you for being attentive and for listening. I hope I haven't made it too boring. As I say, it's already almost 6:15 on a Tuesday. And thank you. It's a good way to end the day.
Yeah. Thank you for the informative session. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks everyone for
Bye-bye.
joining.
Thank you.